All right, today I'm joined by Packy McCormick. Packy, welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do, which is usually a deep dive into the startup or the investing that someone does, and this is going to be a bit more of a working session where we walk through how you're trying to grow your audience. And the best place to start there is just with your goals. And so tell me about the product you're working on and who it's for and what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I write a newsletter called Not Boring. This kind of sprung out of some writing that I had been doing. I started writing last year. I was bored at work, started writing a newsletter, did it for about 12 months. It grew from, call it, I think 25 people signed up for the first one up to maybe 500 by April. So really slow growth, didn't put a lot into it. Coronavirus hit. I was in the middle of starting an in-person social club. That obviously is on pause. So I said, you know what, let's throw everything that I can into this newsletter and see what we can do with it. So rebranded it Not Boring from per my last email, and have really kind of honed in on the topic, which is kind of a combination of business strategy and pop culture. So I resisted writing about business strategy, even though it's my favorite thing to write about for that whole first year, because so many people do it so well. And there are so many wannabe Ben Thompsons out there that I thought there was nothing possible that I could add to the conversation. But I kind of stumbled on this voice, which ends up being kind of my natural voice, which is being able to explain these kind of complex topics through pop culture or jokes or just kind of funnier references, so that people, one, enjoy reading what I naturally write, which is like 3,000 word pieces every week. So it has to be a little bit fun. But also I think some of the ideas stick. So I would explain, for example, Schumpeter's Gale or creative destruction through the Mickey Mouse Club. Or I explained Snapchat through the lens of the movie She's All That, and kind of this journey that looks like the Gartner hype cycle that happens in almost every movie, and it happens in almost every company. And so I try to find those connections so that people can understand what's going on and enjoy it. In terms of my audience, it's pretty broad. So I have everything from, really great VCs and founders and operators down to people who are in college and just starting to learn about business. So that's one of the fun challenges, is how do I write something that's engaging and interesting for those people who are really familiar with the space? And I'll write about companies like Twitter and Snap and, companies that people are really familiar with. So you need to bring something new to the conversation, but also want people who haven't heard of some of the concepts or the companies to really get a good sense for what's going on and why they're making the decisions that they're making. So far, I think it's working pretty well. I've grown over the past, since April, so 3 months, from about 500 people to I think 6,500 as of today. So it's starting to grow pretty well. I've been trying a lot of things, which we'll talk about today, but I'm having an absolute blast with it. So in terms of goals, I think one is continuing to grow. So my original goal was get to 1,000 people by the end of the year. And then that happened soon. And so let's get to 5,000 people by the end of the summer. That happened. It was get to 2,500 people and start charging for this thing. But then, charging for a newsletter kind of shuts off the growth in a pretty big way, because you're not giving everybody the pieces that you're writing to share and spread the word. So right now, really just focused on growing the size of the newsletter while kind of retaining the quality of the audience and the engagement on the newsletter, and then trying a bunch of new things. So next week, for example, we're launching an AngelList syndicate where we will do investment memos on different early stage companies and then give the audience a chance to invest in their seed round. So trying different things like that. At some point, I'm sure there will be a paid edition. At some point, I'll probably have sponsors. I think the debate between should you go ad-based or should you go sponsor or should you go subscription is a false dichotomy. I think you can do a little bit of both and then add things on top. So really just trying to approach this like I would approach a business. And I think there's a lot of tactics that people just don't use, that you would absolutely be fired for not using if you ran a startup. So trying to throw as many of those into the mix as possible.
That's awesome. And it's interesting about the syndicate. I didn't know that. And that touches a little bit into the world I'm entering as far as starting a new fund. And so structurally, VCs have the carry, which is what they get on top of the things they return. And syndicates have that as well, where if you bring a deal in, the audience money that they put in, you get a portion of the profits that you return to them. And that's essentially the same structure as carry as a VC firm, but it's per deal. And so This is a whole thing in VC as far as the aggregate carry on a whole portfolio per deal. Per deal is technically better for the investors. And then on the other side of that, you have the management fees, and those go to paying salaries and often lining pockets of partners because they're getting a lot more money through management fees than they need to. And what's interesting there is that the audience, and if you can monetize it, if that pays your way, it's sort of a direct monetization off of your LPs in a way, but also with the day-to-day work of your writing, which would be like helping you hone that edge as far as how you think about companies and which good opportunities are there. And so that works really well. I think that'll be a win, and it'll be, as they say, a slow win in that companies take 10 years to exit, and so the huge upside on the carry is takes a long time to build, but so does an audience, I guess.
That'll take a long time, and I think there are no management fees the way that the AngelList Syndicate is structured. So I'm playing with the idea of having this be a separate product that ends up being a paid subscription product for a smaller group and potentially have a community involved in that. Debating whether I'm having people pay me to then pay me again on the carry, whether that makes sense or not. But I love it because it's something that I like doing anyway. I'm writing about companies anyway, so to the extent that I'm able to generate deal flow by writing and putting my thoughts out there and having founders understand that I'm going to give a thoughtful look to their company and explain what might be complex in a more fun and simple way to a broader audience. It's not only good for them to get that exposure, but I did my first investment memo and sent the deal to somebody else last week. And the founders immediately were like, this is great, because every time we talk to an investor who doesn't quite get what we're doing, we'll send them this document and they'll have this thing that's fun for them to read, but also tells them a little bit about what we're doing in a way that they might not get out of a deck. So I'm excited to do it because if there's upside, that's great, but I love doing this anyway and getting to meet and talk to founders and do all of that.
So when people have this free versus paid ads, do they sometimes, and I just figure you have a better view on Substack and what people are doing typically, and I'm still getting into this. Some people make it so that some subscribers, some portion of their audience are paid members versus just email subscribers, and they send different letters to each one. I guess that's what Stratechery does, right? And so Substack makes that easy. And so just that hesitation there, I wanted to understand. So you want to make everything free, at least for now, so that you don't have to limit the exposure of the content, which then limits your growth. Is that the model you have in mind?
That's exactly right. And somebody told me the other day that there are people who either love content or love business, and then people aren't generally both. Typically, I love business and I like writing about business. I was an operator before this at a company called Breather. So I love that side of things. But on the content side, I really like doing these like meatier, deeper pieces on companies. So everything that I write ends up being 3,000 to 4,000 word deep dives. And I should probably get better at that. But that means that it takes a lot of time to write each one of these pieces, and I'm not writing a lot of really like marketing-y stuff that just hooks people in. It's more, if you like the content, you should subscribe to this thing, and if you don't, then it's not going to be for you. But because of that, from Thursday afternoon when I send kind of a shorter email, which will be a guest post from somebody, or tomorrow I'm going to announce the syndicate when I write the Thursday email. From the time I send that on Thursday morning until like Sunday night, I'm writing my Monday piece. So there's not a lot of time for me to, add another piece that would just be for paid subscribers. And the things that I write on Monday are, one, I think easily shareable, and two, not specific enough maybe to really get like a high value paying audience for that. I could probably convert my audience at somewhere between 5 and 10%, but maybe on a $5 to $8 a month subscription. And so the math just doesn't work versus continuing to grow this thing and understanding then what other monetization options I have at that point. I think that's probably, even as I'm saying it out loud, the death knell of a lot of media businesses is just get your audience really, really big and then figure out monetization. But I feel pretty confident that it's a high value audience. I've heard that the Financial Times gets CPMs of $360. So it's not what I'm expecting on Not Boring, but I think it's probably somewhere between a traditional CPM and the Financial Times with the type of audience that I'm building, the type of people who are willing every Monday to read a 3,000 to 4,000 word piece pretty religiously. So
that's interesting.
That's kind of the plan.
Yeah, that's really cool. And depending on the content, just talking about media generally, so you have podcasts and video like I'm doing here now, and writing. Writing is definitely the easiest to do yourself because people learn how to write and some are really, really quite good at it. And learning how to think, another side to it. So hopefully you have, of course you do things to add. But then it's also interesting in terms of the tech stack of producing the content, because like an audio engineer can cost, $500 an hour. Like, so you have the ads in part to produce the content because it actually has some operating cost to be able to do it. But writing, you can get an editor and you can get people that help out, but typically people do more themselves for others. It's true for video as well, where you can get other editors and all sorts of, get a whole crew to get in there, let alone the cost of the equipment. If I wanted to buy some $20,000 Red camera for this video, that would be absurd, but like, why not? Like, just actually be really funny to have a Red camera on one side of the interview and then like a webcam on the other, just like have that contrast. But suffice it to say, there's a stack there that people need to support. So it's really cool that you're exploring the space, because this is honestly, this topic by itself, as far as every individual becoming a journalist and diving into the content themselves. I actually really love the idea, and we're obviously both doing it right now. So right now we're talking about making sense of the world, and like, if somebody is starting a Substack or a podcast or a video, they would have gotten more information from us from being in the trenches than what a journalist would understand about this, unless that journalist had a Substack and was doing it themselves as well. Which
is happening more and more, and that's kind of how I split my content too. Is sometimes generally on Mondays I'll write these pieces on big companies. So the last few weeks have been Twitter and Snapchat, and I haven't done Facebook because I don't even know where to begin untangling all of that. But bigger companies on Monday, and then Thursday I'll really use. So if I'm announcing the syndicate, there's going to be a lot of why I'm doing the syndicate, or when I launch the referral program, there's a lot of why. And so I think those are super instructive for not just people who want to write a newsletter or start a media business, but any kind of small 1 to 5 person, maybe non-VC backed shop, or even small early stage VC backed, can learn some kind of tips and tricks and see me fail on certain things and see some things work. So I really like taking people along for that journey in the Thursday pieces, because I think you're absolutely right. When you're actually doing it and talking about it in real time, you learn so much more, and I want to be able to share that.
Cool. So that's a good transition to start talking about sort of the stack we have going on here. So why don't we start with just the tools that you use? And so we already mentioned Substack. And so what does it take? And you have a Twitter account. That's, if you want to plug it now, go for it. And what else is in that stack?
Sure. So my stack is, I think to your point, when you're writing, your stack is your fingers. So that's all I need really is fingers, a computer, and a Substack account. I have my Twitter handle, which is great for marketing, and it feels a little bit awkward to get over that initial hump where you're promoting yourself. I'm way too deep now, and I'm over it. So that's @PackEM. And really the way that it works, I draft things up in Google Docs. I've tried Roam and Notion, and I want to put in the time to get good at Roam because I think that could be really helpful. But for now, I really open up every time I'm writing a new topic, a new Google Doc. I dump whatever I'm reading on the topic into that Google Doc. And then I have a separate Google Doc where I actually write the draft, and I'll probably do 3 or 4 drafts each time. Luckily, I have a younger brother who's really smart and not shy about telling me when I'm being an idiot. And so he's my editor on every one of these pieces, which is great. And then I use Figma to create the awful graphics that I'll throw in each one of the pieces that I write. This background that I have behind me, I created in Figma, no big deal. And then I use Substack to send it out. And then on top of that, because Substack, for most people, unless you're really one of their like kind of top 5 writers, you end up being a Substack subdomain. So I have a landing page on Landon, but Landon doesn't work with the referral tool that I'm using. It doesn't take the JavaScript. So we also have a Webflow site set up for the referral program, and then we use a company called GrowSurf for the referral program.
Cool. And in a moment we can walk through, because I have some windows here open to what you're talking about. But why don't you use Webflow for everything? Like, what does Landon buy you?
Yeah, so we will eventually use Webflow for everything. Landon is great because it's really easy to set up a landing page without even having to invest the time into learning Webflow. it's maybe the best investment I've made is spending a couple of days just going through their video tutorials. They're really helpful, and it's nice to be able to build something as a non-technical person. So all that said, we will switch over to Webflow at some point. Landon was really easy. I'm working on this now with a partner of mine who is helping out on a lot of the growth side of things. And so, he found Landon, built it, and then also found Grosser for us. So the two of us have been, our not motto, but just our attitude is better done than perfect. And so we're just trying things at a pretty high velocity now. I think it's one of the things that I like best about writing, even when I was thinking about starting a non-media company before. Having an audience and words is a really good way to test ideas. And so you can write a newsletter, it'll take a few hours, send it out to an audience and see if they respond. And so that's kind of what we're doing. That's our approach generally as we build new things for Not Boring. Is test it out. If it works, we'll invest more into it. If it doesn't, we'll throw it out and we'll write about what we learned through that failure.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, for me, I am starting out similarly with an audience, and so I do more on YouTube, and I don't have a Substack. My current new fund homepage is just a Webflow blog, and that has I don't know if you could subscribe via Webflow, but I have a MailChimp account tied to it. But it's not everything's hooked up as it should be, so I don't nearly as often in an email, in a YouTube say hey, go subscribe here to get the latest content, because you can subscribe on YouTube, and that's different than the blog content that's there. And so it just you need to navigate all this around. Let alone the VC website experience is typically, hey, here's our awesome team, here are awesome portfolio companies, and that's about it. Here's a contact form nobody reads. So it's one of these.
And there's a little about page too, which explains that they're founder friendly and all of those things as well.
Yeah, all the cliches, people changing the world, and which I love it. Don't get me wrong.
Me too.
Totally optimistic about it. And so now going on to GrowFlow, and we could talk. I'll show the UI in a minute here, but there's what do they give you? And so what exactly is the sort of API connections between these services, and what do you get out of it?
Yeah, so the API connection ends up being a lot of manual work. That's our fingers again as well, except for between Webflow and GrowSurf. So between Webflow and GrowSurf, we just plugged in a line of JavaScript, and every time somebody enters their email, then it gets captured as a referral. So there will be share.notboring.email/the referral code. Whenever somebody then signs up through the Webflow, having come from that link, right into GrowSurf, it counts that for whoever the referrer was. From there, though, both on Landon and on GrowSurf/Webflow, it's a process of downloading the list at the end of each day, dumping that into a Google Sheet, and then taking the emails from that Google Sheet and putting them back in Substack. From there, simultaneously, people are also subscribing to Substack directly. And so we'll download those and put them into GrowSurf so that everybody has their referral codes by the time that I send out an email.
Interesting. So what about the fulfillment? So the referral program, it's like t-shirts and stickers, right? As far as you get to a certain level. And so if you want a sticker of that background or something like that, that's what you can get. Yeah. So how do you do that part? Do you just download again and mail it out, or does GrowSurf do that?
And so GrowSurf tells us who's hit which targets. And then, so if you get to 10 referrals, we'll give you a shout out with a link to your social profile and a link to your company in the email. So I think that's actually the two things that people actually care about the most are the shout out and just advancing on the leaderboard. I think the stickers and the t-shirts are cool, but people don't care as much about those. Partially because we're still in the middle of designing the t-shirt. We're moving fast on this. We had the idea to do it, and we just kind of went. So we're still designing the t-shirt. That should be done this week. And then we'll send it out to the first people who've hit that 30-person target. But yeah, we see who it is. We have a separate form on Webflow to collect people's information once they've hit that level, their address, their t-shirt size, all of that. And then we'll send it on out to them.
Okay, so here's your landing page as we walk through this. And this is notboring.email, which is not your Substack. So you've made a separate, this is a landing page, if I understand it.
This is the landing page.
Right. And so if I were to go to the referral program here, I would see this leaderboard, and you can see some of the stickers that you can get, and also HU something or other at gmail.com Good thing they masked out the gmail.com. I couldn't guess possibly what that is. But this dude, this person he's done a lot for you. It's pretty incredible. So
that is a well-known early stage VC who's used his LinkedIn and Facebook, not yet his Twitter. I think it'll really blow up.
Walk. Yes. Excellent. Yeah, that's pretty easy. I wonder if I can guess the others if you give me some hints.
You can't guess number two. Number two is a buddy of mine who has a big Instagram following. And so he posted it in a story one time and got a bunch of people to sign up. So
cool.
They can come from anywhere.
And yes, then Hunter Walk will be getting a t-shirt. Excellent. And some stickers. And so what I did, I actually scrolled down a lot on this one. You can actually see this is what I did before. I pressed load more a bunch of times just to get some stats. And I think this is just interesting for the audience for the distribution. I'm not sure this is typical. And so Hunter Walk is a power user here. And so what this is showing, this graph, is that leaderboard on so every position on the leaderboard is on the x-axis, and the y-axis is the number of people they invited. And I think the most interesting side here is the cumulative. And so you're looking at your top 20 being around 75% of the referrals you've gotten, totaling around 600. And that's interesting just in terms of the whales and how much they give you, which is awesome. And so you got some nice friends. And we can walk through the program in a minute, but then you also have this graph, which you posted on Twitter, at PackyM, so people can go check you out. And so what's interesting, is this where you launched the referral program? Is like inflection point right there? Or is that at the start of the campaigns?
That is something else which we can talk about. So we launched the landing page in part because we wanted to have a homepage, but in part because it also gave us an excuse to launch on Product Hunt. And so we did launch on Product Hunt. We got to number 2 on Product Hunt. And so that drove about 2,000 of the total subscribers just that day. So that when you see it really kind of pick up there, that was what happened.
So this is Product Hunt. Awesome. And I was going to say, we'll walk through the experience in a minute. That Product Hunt endorsement, just having a lot of people say it's awesome. But that Product Hunt has a specific thing for podcasts, or is it newsletters, or everything, or did you count it as just like a product? And okay.
We counted it as a product. I actually did a walkthrough the night before. So if I'm launching something, I'll do a thread the night before, and that's how we met actually. When I was launching the referral program in a thread, but I did a thread, and there's actually a bunch of newsletters that have done well on Product Hunt. It's not typically launching the newsletter itself, but it's typically launching something around it that people put on Product Hunt. And so a landing page or a more built out site ends up being the thing that people use to launch on Product Hunt pretty often.
Yeah, there's that old Airbnb story where, if your launch doesn't go well, just launch again. But who's going to notice? And so you have some feature or some extra page and just launch a few times. So here's, my domain. Here's this new program I'm doing. Here's the syndicate that we're building. Cool. So let's start walking through this. Just people can go on your social and walk through this exact same thing, but I figured a good way to anchor the conversation might be to just walk through some screenshots and discuss each part. This is probably a good time for me to talk about my background too, because so I was at iRobot working on robotics, and then I decided I wanted to work on web payments so that people could easily support stuff they love online. So going like Substack, Patreon, totally Kickstarter in the world that we're trying to do. I was called Tipjoy. And then I went to go work at Facebook, so tried to understand social, but really learned about growth. And then went to Dropbox, where focused heavily on their sharing and referral flows. And so this kind of product breakdown where you have an idea of an experiment to run is the bread and butter of a growth team, where we think this part is like a big inflection point. And so we're going to try to improve that and see the metrics and how they improve. And then my second startup actually directly built products in the referral space, and then Lyft acquired that. And so I have looked at so many referral programs. I've done this kind of breakdown so many times. It's just so much fun, actually, because everything it's slightly different every time, and you have different tools here. And so let's dive in. So we have your social media, and this is not necessarily how somebody learns about this. They might have gotten a forwarded email, they might have something else, but this is one entry point. And you have your notboring.email, which is your landing page, and then the Substack link both. What's Not Boring Club?
So Not Boring Club was, so it's now been co-opted as the social handle of Not Boring, but was planning on, before coronavirus hit, or during the time where coronavirus hit, launching kind of an extracurricular layer for grown-ups in the city. So it had a debate club and a philosophy club and all of these different things. So I think, a great college campus combined with a Soho House, that's where that was heading. But during coronavirus, obviously not doing anything in person.
That's pretty interesting. I wonder how much you could do on Zoom there. That's actually
We
really,
tried.
yeah.
So that's a whole nother conversation. I tried to bring
Yeah.
some of the stuff onto Zoom, but the more niche your online community, the better. I think my thesis was I can actually have this be a little bit broader and have it be interest based within a broader group. If you have those in-person interactions and people can form those bonds by debating against each other, having conversation in person, it doesn't work to have a broader group in an online community as far as I've seen. Like the ones that have done the best during coronavirus are the ones that are super, super niche. So I'm in a Telegram group for business newsletter writers. That one is super active. The more and more diffuse it gets, the less conversation volume there's been during coronavirus.
Fascinating. Yeah, and in-person events can change that quite a bit. But getting back to this, so I was already on the page, but if I were to click on the Substack, I would see here. And the goal here is obvious. And so the notes in yellow, if you could read that, are sort of my comment on this. And there's really just one thing to do and to subscribe. And at this point, I think that's what you want. You want somebody to like actually get on the mailing list to go. But the context here is around going through the referral flow. And so a lot of my comments are around getting the referral program boosted up. And so right now, if it's about 10% of your subscribers, also might maintain the ratio. So as a new growth channel, that would be like a new way to grow faster, as opposed to getting on Product Hunt, which is like a one-time spike. And so the nice thing about referrals is that it should grow with you, depending on how you do it. So a lot of these bits of advice and discussion points are trying to improve that, see how you can drive these numbers, and also hear what you think about it. And so then if I clicked on, I could subscribe. I could also let me read it first. And so here's a recent post about Twitter. And what's interesting is you wrote everything here, right? This is not boilerplate. And so in terms of welcome to the 486 newly not boring people,
Yes.
that's just like the intro to this that you put in. It's not pulling in a number from Substack or anything, right?
Exactly right.
Okay. And so then if I were to finally put in my email, I would get an email like this from you. And so one thing to note in the back here, if you have not subscribed yet, this call to action is probably the proper one. Like get you to actually subscribe. That makes a ton of sense to me. But you don't mention the referral program in this post. And that'll be important later when we look at the math of how these things work. And so then this is the initial email you have, which is the first mention of the referral program in the flow. And I just want to point out there's like a bunch of other links here. And this is where you have some conflicting goals, because if somebody already knows they love you, then they should go and refer their friends. And if they don't, then, well, here's some great links to check out things I've written about. So it's really like getting them to activate, so to speak, as far as being willing to refer. And so when you write this kind of welcome email, like what are you thinking about this? Because you mentioned a few different things here, including your personal email and your Twitter handle. And is it just how did you think about writing this?
It's a really good question. So we actually wrote this before we had a referral program, and so we bolted on the referral piece, and I think you can probably tell that here. Really, this is just assuming that somebody came in because they read maybe one thing, or because somebody shared something on Twitter that they liked something that I wrote. Wanted people to kind of get a taste of the different things that I'm writing about. To your point, if somebody's already read something and then given me their email and signed up, maybe they know enough that I should be leading with the referral program there.
There's a lot of different options. And so there's one question in Substack, this welcome email. Do you see downstream metrics from this? So if you did an A/B test, first off, you can't A/B test, can you?
No.
And
you can't A/B test. You can't see downstream metrics. Like really, there's not a lot on the analytics side. On Substack.
So just to highlight maybe one difference between media company that you're putting a lot of tools together here and a startup. Like a startup, if this were like your welcome email and your goal was to get back into a mobile app, say, or back into use some SaaS product, and then you have other things you want to measure, like, for the people that would go here and then click on this link, how many actually sent referrals, that kind of loop is very, very important. And so the kinds of experiments I've run at Dropbox, for example, they had built out, at the time it was DIY because there weren't other good tools here, which is surprising how much they built internally. So this is 2012 I'm talking about, 2010, 2011. And they, so it was very easy to run A/B tests and email overall with Dropbox, which is awesome. And so adding things like PS invite your friends, and here's a link to the referral program was enormous. Generally, Dropbox doesn't bother you very much. That's a whole other conversation about how much they should bother you. But that kind of, hey, use the referral program to existing users continuously matters a lot. And I'll get to the metrics later on, just demonstrating how big of a deal that is. So now let's go with the next step. So I clicked on the referral program, and it's a bit slow, actually, surprising. I don't know if that's like loading in something in there.
It might be because that's loading in the GrowSurf, so it may be. So it's Webflow loading GrowSurf leaderboard. So
it's probably not the first thing to optimize, so it's debatable. It's also interesting because the call to action is below the fold. And so people always debate this in terms of like the Substack example here, both here and here. The call to action is like very clear and crisp with like a nice button. And here it's actually you have to scroll down to see it. But the referral program social proof is interesting because you have people on this list that are already well above the rewards. And so there's like evidence that you can go and do this. And so that's cool. And one tiny thing I was thinking, it's not obvious you have stickers here. I actually don't know if you use the word sticker. And so
we use it right below in the second one there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. So it's interesting in terms of like what you're winning. The t-shirt is obvious, so maybe so it's implicit. It's also interesting that these are, it's not money. It's not like it doesn't save you money. And so compare it to like Airbnb where you can get like $75 if you invite a host. But it's surprisingly motivating for a community, right? Like the
it
stickers
really
matter
is.
a lot. Yeah.
Stickers matter and that leaderboard matters.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so then this is the form where if you scroll down, you'll see it. And here's actually something super interesting. You already know their email. You know who they are, right? And so because of the way you're attacking these things together, I have to do this extra step to get somebody to enter their email, which maybe is easy. But that's because it's GrowSurf, right? Because they don't know all your users.
Yes.
And I suppose they probably have API hooks to automate this, where you can get a referral link for every user. But then on this page, they would need to have like the link from this email here. When you talk about the referral program, you would need to hook that up so that their referral link was there, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah.
So like, what is the referral program? Like eventually the referral program is this user has a link that they can go share with somebody else. And so you're adding two steps here. I need to not only go to the referral page to be able to do it, I need to put in my email. And then I'm at that point where I can actually share the link. And so that's tricky. And so here's the link that I have there, and it goes to share.notboring.email with a code there. And if you go to just that domain, it generates a code, which is kind of interesting. And if I click email here, then it goes to this email. Does GrowSurf give you metrics on which channel people use to share? Like how they interact with this form? Okay.
No.
That'd be another surface area for A/B testing. Actually, can you edit this form, the look and feel?
I would imagine we can edit look and feel. We can probably edit size and color. We can edit. I don't think we can add different social links other than the ones they have there.
Okay. Those are the biggest ones, so I think it's fine. But it's interesting in terms of... So imagine it like this. You have a user, they're on your referral program, and now how many invites do they send, and how well do they convert? And I'll show you the metrics breakdown in a second, but it's like... So when you want to know exactly where to improve, like maybe you shouldn't have a Facebook button, right? Maybe you shouldn't have a text button. And so if you look at the user's net from the time they interact with it, and you could run tests that say, well, if I didn't have a text button, are they more likely to send the email, which then has a higher conversion rate than text? And you could run these kinds of A/B tests pretty easily. That is if you can control it. And so you need to not only know this form has this change, but then also that downstream, the users that come from that end up subscribing at a higher rate or whatever. And so there's these channels also can be opaque or not to you. So for example, if you were a real app, the email button, this compose, it's cool, like a mail to. That's like the very easy way to do email. But a lot of services do their own email. And so they can control everything end to end. They know everything about what's going on under the hood as far as the metrics around that email. And so for example, if I post this to Facebook, the app, the person hosting the referral program has no idea how often those links are viewed, like newsfeed things. And so let's say you wanted to run a test and make the preview image different on what is shared the link to Facebook. You don't know actually how people engage with that. You do know maybe the subscribe at the end. And so there are ways of running these tests, but it just highlights the opacity matters a lot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. And so this email, I think is fine. What I like about this email is there's a problem when you put words into somebody's mouth. And so specifically when you compose an email for the users is tricky because I think the worst example of this is Wealthfront, where the signature, instead of saying enjoy there, it's happy investing. And that's not what a normal human says. That's like
Right.
Obviously a marketer wrote that for like a marketing message. And it's like, so if I were to forward that to somebody, they'd be like, hey, did your email get hacked? Like what
Yeah.
is going on here? Why would you send that? And so just think if I was thoughtless, I would click email, type your email in and click send. And so the content of your email has to be either bare, which then is just a link, which has no context, or something written by you, which is also tricky because it's the user's words, or putting words in the user's mouth, or you have to make them type. And some people do this. They'll like actually have an entry form where you have to go and dive in. But overall, this is because of the brand of not boring, and like I think you'll like not boring. Like, hey, I think you'll like Dropbox or whatever other referral program like that fits. It's really cute because it's like this compliment. It's going to open an email, and because it's a mail to, it's coming from someone you know, and
Yep.
that gets around whole other spam issues that are interesting. You could still get spam issues because links that get shared a lot that are marked as spam, like just having that domain might be bad if you get super spammy. But that'll only happen if you get into super spammy things like import contact and send all, and don't do that.
We're not doing that anytime soon.
Yeah. That's what YesCraft did, by the way. We tried to have the performance of that many invites, but without the bullshit of sending 3,000 emails. There's an A/B test we ran at Dropbox where we turned off the select all button on a contact importer. And so that meant that you were not able to send to everyone you know. You'd have to select the ones. And I think you might have also capped the number that you send on any given flow. But turning off select all made us decrease referral email volume by 80% and decrease referral signups by 2%. And just highlights It's all spam. It's like nobody wants to see that.
Wow.
And that's like a short-term test and doesn't even count the deliverability. And so if you have 80% minus 2% being marked as spam, you can bet a bunch of other emails are not coming through. Some of those emails are from channels that are converting at a far higher rate. So if I were to do a shared folder to you where you and I want to collaborate on something, if that gets marked as spam, that is a major hit in user engagement. And so there's all these downstream benefits to not being marked as spam. But in this case, just to clarify, you are sending from the user's account, so it's far less of an issue because people don't have deliverability issues as much to friends. And let's say I'm a recipient here and I click on that link, and here's what I see. And I see the problem with this is, so it's again, very nice copy, like someone thinks you're really smart. And that works either way. And I want to point out that is on this page no matter what, whether you've gotten the invite or you just go to this domain. And so there's a notion of personalization of somebody that sent this, right? And so if, let's say the referral came from like a social network and you had a profile on there saying like, hey, Ivan wants you to use this and here's his picture, like, or here's 5 other friends that might want to do this, that kind of face pile and names, they matter so much. But here I think you've gotten around that with the copy and you have other social proof. And so you have the 6,000 plus and the product hunt are both really nice to be able to say like, hey, this is something that a lot of other people like, and those numbers will just get better over time, right? Because if you, I don't know what the threshold is, probably more, maybe 1,000. Like after 1,000, people think this is something worth pursuing. I see this on YouTube a little bit, and right now I'm in the, let's call it the early days of my audience building, where it's like I think I have 140 awesome, amazing, beautiful subscribers, and it's like, oh, if that were 140,000, that would be a lot easier for a few things, like the hesitation to subscribe, knowing the number of other people that subscribe there, and so the social proof.
It almost feels lower commitment if you're just one of 140,000.
Yeah, and it's sort of this is like very well known in psychology. So if you see, for example, a restaurant and it has a big line outside, you can't help but think it's a higher quality restaurant. And so when I say social proof, that is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So signals that other people have thought about this more than you have and have decided this is good, and so you don't have to think it's just good. It's also interesting if you read, Cialdini, Influence, and other books like that. There's this concept of, and I think Substack might do this, personal social proof, where if I do something, then I do it again. It's like there's a line in my head, and I just got behind myself, and every time I do that thing, it's like a longer and longer line. And so whenever I subscribe on a Substack or something like that, that might be social proof that this is like a good behavior to do. At least that's something I'm convinced of. Or upvoting on Product Hunt or other
it makes total sense.
habitual behaviors like that. Cool. So this is how I break down the metrics. And this is from an old blog post. So YesGraph had a blog. And I should probably just rehost this on, I should take all the blog posts there and put them on my own blog. My new blog to rehash the ideas, because I think they're still valid. And so I'd love to hear what you think about this, the metrics here. And so what are the metrics we've seen? We've seen for the number of people, how many, the leaderboard, how many they've invited. We know the number of subscribers that you have, and we know the total number of referrals sent, right? So we can actually estimate a little bit of the new things here, of the variables here. So the new users over all users is, well, if the new users is 600 and all users is 6,000, that would be 0.1. But that's probably not fair because of the shape of that leaderboard with a few people taking a lot of actions. And so it's almost certainly better than that and worse in different ways. Because your last 1,000 users might not have brought you 100 new, your last 1,000 subscribers might not have brought you the 100 new referrals. But that first 2,000 did bring you 500-600, and so that would be a better ratio. And so the idea here is that you can break down this new referred users to old ones by the metrics that come into it. And when we understand this breakdown, you'll see why I talk so much about talking about the referral program and referencing it, because the structure of this metric is continuous, and so it's not like, hey, this is your referral program, you're done. Think about it, every single week you measure this. And so in the last week, you might have gotten, let's say, 60 new referrers, but then all your users would still be 6,000. And so that would be 1%. And so if that were the number, then the nice thing about this viral coefficient is it's actually a growth rate if you do it in a measure of time. And so if your new users over all users is 0.01, that means you grow 1% in that time period. So if you want to grow your newsletter 10% every period from the referral program, these numbers, they got to get bumped up, right?
Yep.
And so how would you do that? You'd get more usage, more spread, and more conversion. And so people would come to the referral program, they would send more invites, and those invites would convert. And this is where some of the opacity comes in. So if you think about all people coming to the referral program over all your subscribers, if you don't link to it in your email, then you just miss this big opportunity, because you actually send 2 emails a week. And so if let's say they're independent, 5% of people click on this link to the referral program, that would be 10% of users that would go to the referral program of all your subscribers. And so that also, notice these are all rates, which means I hope it's 10%, because if it's not, you're not going to have a larger growth number there that you're looking for. Keeping in mind is weekly growth, so even 10% weekly growth would be crazy good. So 1%, 2% weekly would be fine for one channel. And so then there's invites per inviter, and this relates to the metrics on this form. And so when somebody interacts with this, what do they do? And so it also highlights how if you need to type in your email to get it working, how that's tricky. And let's say that you could make some connections here. So for example, in your Substack, you could say, hey, this is your referral link, forward this to someone. And then already, so in terms of participation usage, they're looking at the email that you sent out, the Substack subscriber email, and they're already in it. They see the referral link. And so now they just need to click forward and go. And if they send it to one person, then the usage would be everyone that opens your email, and the spread would be 1 on average of the person that decides to forward, which might be 50%. And so there's ways of bumping these numbers, but that would mean you need that referral link in the Substack. So can you customize the emails?
It's one of the challenges of Substack is that you can't, and so that's why we're sending. Actually, it relates to a couple of different things. It's one, why we have to send people to a different form to enter their email to then get their referral code. And two, it's why I don't highlight it as much, because it's not a line of copy that says forward this. It's a paragraph of copy that says, all right, go to this page, enter your email, get your referral code, and then do X, Y, or Z thing with it. So all because we can't plug into that to Substack directly, we have to do all of these workarounds. I think that one of the biggest unlocks that Substack can make is to just add a referral program. I mean, I can't imagine that it's incredibly difficult, and then it just opens up so many things, like being able to customize the emails, like being able to share specific posts that you like with your referral code versus just sharing the landing page. So that would be a major unlock. And in the absence of that, at some point we'll need to move to a more custom built solution that, or even something like a MailChimp that has a plugin like that.
Yeah, can you have attributes on your subscribers at all? Like any other field that you add in?
Not in Substack. No, you get their email address.
Okay. Yeah, MailChimp, you'd be able to do that. And so there might be other ways to do it if you change the referral provider. So for example, if the referral code may as well just be the person that referred you, their email address. And so if you can at least customize the person's email, like in the email to them, that would actually be able to get it done. Assuming your referral backend could take that, like refer email equals, evan.kierkegaard@gmail.com, and then that would be enough to make the connection of the leaderboard and all that. But that's not the way GrowFlow works. And so they have these like codes. And the reason for that is obvious on social media, where it's like, hey, I want to be able to post this on Twitter. I don't want to post my email on Twitter. So like you need to have this hidden code. But you could also have a hash of that. There's a bunch of ways of doing it. Then the new for every invite, this is interesting because I don't think you have the number of invites. You could look at Twitter and see how often people do this, but because you don't have the metrics of that share form, you don't actually know the conversion rate by different channels. So it's tough to say.
And what's interesting is on GrowSurf, there's a dashboard that has referrals, invites, impressions, unique impressions. Invites doesn't populate. So there's something that's broken, but people who have multiple referrals have 0 invites, which doesn't make sense.
I would bet that what's happening there is they have an API that allows you to send in, like when you manage the referral sending, like the email that gets sent, you can tell them the number of invites so you can understand the conversion. And really it's like, in that case, you want to know like interactions with the form, like what came from that per user and how it changes. But suffice it to say, this is like let's call it a growth process, where it's like you have a way of understanding the product experience. In this case, it's a referral product, and you could break it down. And the number one mistake people make is related to not including it in the referral program. Very often I'll see a referral program that's like a header link, and that means the thing about this inviters over all users. So people came to your website, saw that link, and then clicked on it, which is immediately capped at like 1%, like in a weekly period. And so what that means is it's like almost physically impossible to have 1% growth in that time period from that channel, which means it's just not that exciting. And so like if your goal is growth and you want to hit, if you're an early stage company, like 10 to 20% growth monthly or weekly, these are both, it's a rough range of what would be good. And so if you can't get 1 percentage point out of this program, it's not going to be worth it. And so, so especially because people put a lot of effort into these referral programs, sometimes they'll program all these things and then they just don't measure that actually nobody's using it. And that's like the main bottleneck. And so there's a bunch of other things to optimize here, but because you're a writer, because the copy is so good, I think you've made up for some of the deficiencies here. And if there's just a way of like meshing some of these programs together, and I think that Substack doing it would be like far and away the simplest. So if you were to have the ear of a PM at Substack that could actually change something, and you wanted to build a referral program, what would you want in it? Would you want like would it be related to a paid tier? Like how do you think, would it be just the stickers? Like what do you think they should do to make this easy?
Yeah, I mean, I think first things first, just, if there was just a share link and people had their own link that they could share directly attached to either just notboring.substack.com or to particular posts, and then I was able to track that would be number one in my book. But then two, I think, it's the ability to maybe earn a paid subscription, I think would be great. Those two things I think alone would be super worthwhile for me. And then obviously the thing that I like is the leaderboard, and the thing that gets people excited is great. The ability to plug that right into the email I think would be great. Like, so there's a few little things like that, but really for me the biggest would be the link from Substack so that I could explain it in one line at the top of the email, a button that's tied into Substack as cleanly as the subscribe form is tied into Substack, just so it goes, to your point, a little bit more viral than just that one person seeing it, subscribing, and that's it. Also, actually, one other wish while we're at it, the ability to make that dynamic, right? So if somebody comes to the site and sees the email capture form and hasn't subscribed, they should see the email capture form. But if they have, instead of it just saying you're subscribed, it should be their referral link, right? So I think that'd be great.
Because I end up coming back to people's Substacks a fair amount. So even when I'm subscribed, and I don't think they track state as much as they should in terms of who is already there. And you could accidentally subscribe multiple times, and having some other experience there would make a lot of sense. Little bit more. You mentioned tracking this per post. And so is the idea there, I really like this idea, is like you write some content and some content is more shared than others and yields more growth. That would be amazing, because then I guess you get this a little bit as far as this email was forwarded more often, so you get more subscribers after a certain time point, but that's correlated just in time, not per post, right? And so you'd want to know, like, this post was actually shared more, whether it's directly forwarded along or using the referral program. And that meant that this kind of content helps me grow my audience. And it's not going to be surprising.
It's that, and it's just people, it gives people something meatier to send to people than just like, hey, I really like Not Boring. It's, you should read this post, and by the way, like, I'm being tracked here, and if you sign up off of this post, then I get credit for that. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. But then, being able to understand by post, they have a little bit right now where you can see how many times each post has been viewed. It tells you how many people have signed up off of each post, but it falls way short of the actual number that I see happening from each post. So there's something that's kind of broken there. But just the ability for someone to say, I like this particular post, sign up with my link, would be massive.
Yeah, on the shareable content, it's interesting because I was looking at Y Combinator's YouTube page, and they have 24 million views across a bunch of videos, and 14 million of those are either about Zuck or Elon Musk, like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and 9 million views are just three-minute videos of, like, they have hours and hours of content, and so like more than a third of what they do is from 10 minutes of content. And so, what content you write will dramatically affect how many people share and read it. And so knowing what it is, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
And per post, all these analytics to be able to provide for what your audience wants and grow bigger. Cool. That's a good note to add on. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's actually a really fun deep dive. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it even more. I mean, this is consulting that you can't pay for. So I thank you very much, and I'm excited to tighten this up.
All right, great. Thanks.